Calling this meeting to order if everyone wants to take their seat. Welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Heritage. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person. Do we have anybody on Zoom today? Okay, I'm going to skip that part. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking, and all comments should be addressed through the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee is meeting to study the effects of the technological advances in AI on the creative industries. And it is now my pleasure to welcome our witnesses. From Art IA, I've got Marc-Olivier Ducharme, Directeur Innovation des Alliances et
Director, Innovation Alliances and Futures, Poropol.
At University, Kelly Wilhelm, the head of the Cultural Policy Hub. We have Music Canada, Patrick Rogers, the Chief Executive Officer. Music Publisher Canada, we have Margaret McGuffin, Chief Executive Officer. From the Society of Composers, Authors and Music Publishers of Canada, otherwise known as SOCAN, we have Jennifer Brown, Chief Executive Officer. Welcome. Each organization will have 5 minutes to speak, and we will commencer avec Marc-Olivier Ducharme.
We will start with Marc-Olivier Ducharme. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your invitation. I represent a group of cultural organizations, research centers, and artists at IA. Our goal is to understand the impact of AI on the arts through action research. And we have just published a report on more than 2 years' work, and another one is on the way. The Silicon Valley model of technological development has failed us for decades. Back in the 80s, we already knew that this model only served shareholders, not humankind. Today, AI is amplifying this problem. AI giants are funded to the tune of hundreds of billions, a scale deviation that creates dominant positions that are difficult to offset. Numerous studies and surveys, even within this committee, have highlighted the negative impacts of certain social platforms on the population, particularly teenagers and marginalized people. Risk of political bias in recommendation systems have also been documented. These same risks and biases are perpetuated in the various generative AI, since their training corpus feeds directly from the data produced in these networks. Our problem is not one of technology per se, but of digital feudalism. Silicon Valley is scraping our talents, our data, and our talent, and our dollars. Our findings are clear. This model primarily optimizes shareholder profitability, not the public interest. Without safeguards, ethics and cultural specificities become externalities, leading to cultural homogenization. Social costs are borne by communities and, of course, governments, and this is causing cultural homogenization, particularly amongst linguistic and cultural minorities. But without cultural sovereignty, there can be no economic sovereignty, since nothing could set us apart as a society. Silicon Valley already controls all our production tools. Should we let them take over 100% control of AI? That's the question. AI represents the next frontier of technological colonization. Our findings show the following. The exploitation of creators by dominant AI models trained on data stolen from creators, marginalizing Francophone, indigenous, and other minority cultural communities, such as Acadians. This is unacceptable. The threat to cultural diversity as toxic algorithms homogenize cultures, threatening our cultural and linguistic differences. A development pace whose accelerated release cycles impose technical and cultural standards before any public deliberation, without adaptation laboratories, without linguistic minorities having the time to adjust tools, interfaces, and data sets. Now, we are living in Napster moment 2.0. Without intervention, we risk repeating the music industry's mistake, losing control of our cultural data and creative tools to foreign platforms.
Data. L'exploitation des communs numériques.
The exploitation of digital commons, something we've created, is at the heart of all this. The artists we work with don't seem to be afraid of technology, but rather of not being able to survive economically in a future dictated by tech giants. Art year proposes government investment in cultural AI experimentation, training, and production labs that remain owned and governed by the Canadian cultural sector. Experimentation spaces where cultural communities develop their own AI tools adapted to Canadian French, Indigenous, and other minority languages. We are proposing cultural data trust, sovereign infrastructure that protects and enhances our cultural data with governance rules and access modalities decided by the communities and the artists themselves. We promote training programs that enable artists to master AI rather than being dependent on it, hence preserving their creative autonomy. And in our opinion, this is an exportable model because we are creating a model of a culturally responsible AI ecosystem that can be exported to other sectors and other countries, positioning Canada as a global leader. I would like to say that Canada has already proven its capacity to develop innovative policies when it comes to AI. Like our policy has enabled Canada to become a global leader, and we have created poles of excellence like MENA Montreal that have positioned Canada at the center of AI development. And Art AI is part of this tradition. What we want to do is develop AI labs for culture. We are extending this visionary approach to the cultural sector, protecting our diversity while creating economic opportunities. AI is already transforming our creative industries. We are now trying to protect our cultural diversity rather than suffer homogenization. The Canadian government has invested $2.4 billion in AI, none of which has been allocated to culture. Thank you, sir. Thank you. The next speaker is...
The floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, honourable members of the committee, for the invitation to appear today. My name is Kelly Wilhelm, and I am the head of the Cultural Policy Hub at OCAD University. And prior to that, I've spent about 20 years in the federal policy and funding system around the arts and culture. I want to start by breaking down a false dichotomy that we often hear in discussions around the creative industries and AI. That dichotomy is between two sides. On the one hand, those who argue that private sector development of AI must be allowed to continue unfettered and unregulated, or the country's capacity to innovate will be at risk. And on the other side, we often hear those who argue that government regulation and guidelines are essential to preserve the country's culture and identity. You can see this split clearly in the government's 2024 consultations around AI and copyright, and internationally in any policy discussion that addresses the use of copyrighted works in the development of AI systems. Here's the reframing that I want to propose to this dichotomy. Government action that values and invests in creative and cultural professionals and their IP contributes to innovation and does not stifle it. There's no question that AI impacts creative IP, copyright, and labor. It has already disrupted the value chains on which the creative industries, their companies, and their workers depend. These are critical issues, and collective work on them by industry, researchers, and policymakers must continue. You've heard already in these meetings that the creative industries are asking for transparency and fairness in how the content to which they own the rights is used in AI systems and in identifying AI-generated content for what it is. They're also asking for a seat at the table where AI policy decisions that affect them are being made. And this is a point that I would echo and support. That's because while AI is affecting the cultural industries, as your question and your study suggests, the effect is not one way. And that goes back to my reframing. Like other technologies before it, creative industries are using AI to do what they do best: create, innovate, and tell Canada's stories. In the Cultural Policy Hub's convening with creative industries over the past 2 years, we've heard that many are using AI and building AI tools that help them to run their businesses, so the back end, and in their creative work. They use AI for many purposes: in creation, production, distribution, and marketing. They use it to reduce technical, financial, and environmental barriers for all sorts of creators, whether those are small and medium-sized enterprises, whether they're Indigenous creators, or even those working in rural and remote communities. They use AI to maximize the value of their IP, to find new markets, and build out fan bases in global markets. They use it to protect the sovereignty of the data that they hold, which is cultural data, and to develop new protocols and ownership models. And artists, as we know, they work with AI to create the entirely new and unexpected, very often in collaboration with tech companies and product designers in the private sector. Creative industry leaders are asking, how can Canada shape AI in a way that protects and enhances our culture, creativity, and sovereignty? And 4 key themes keep coming up in our conversations with those leaders that I want to share with you today. The first is around sovereign and accessible data. Creative industries, like other industries, need access to data, including government data sets, to develop effective Canadian-made AI tools and solutions. Government should be investing in Canadian-owned and governed public data infrastructure, an AI commons, if you will, alongside its investments in private companies and AI compute. Second area that keeps coming out, skills, training, and education. Canada needs a national AI strategy for education from K-12, post-secondary, and in professional sectors like the creative industries. The strategy should prepare Canadians to harness new AI tools and technologies to remain competitive in an evolving job market. And this is a concern the creative industries share with other industries. The third area, which you'll hear, I'm sure, about today again, is regulation. So most in the cultural sector are calling for simple and clear transparency requirements, harmonized standards, and shared principles in order to avoid uncertainty, fragmentation, and confusion in this marketplace. And the last point, cultural sovereignty and creative ambition. This moment of economic, technological, and geopolitical change is the right time for Canada to be ambitious in this space, not to draw back, to think big, and to invest in the full diversity of creators and creative SMEs that drive our creative economy in this country. Canada has long recognized the importance of our creative industries to our cultural sovereignty. It's why we have the tools and the successful industries that we do, film and TV, music, and others. AI is fundamentally a homogenizing tool. It is about recording and reproducing existing patterns found in the data that is fed into the machine. It does much of the cognitive work for us, replacing the human work of synthesizing and considering patterns that is essential to creating new ones. So let's be clear, AI-generated content is not a replacement for original creative IP. And right now, we need that creative IP as an engine to drive not just our economic sovereignty, but our cultural sovereignty as well. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilhelm. Next, I give the floor to Patrick Rogers from Music Canada for 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Rogers, and I am the CEO of Music Canada. Music Canada is the trade association of Canada's major labels, Sony Music Entertainment Canada, Warner Music Canada, and Universal Music Canada. Our companies have offices full of Canadians making Canadian music for the Canadian market and the world. And they are very excited about what AI could mean for the future of music. For my members and the artists they invest in, AI as a tool can help human artists elevate their creativity, find efficiencies in the recording process, and help our industry protect its IP. But having faced an existential technological crisis in our lifetime, the music industry has some lessons learned that shape our advocacy to government. As you know, and not that long ago, home internet created the possibility for peer-to-peer file sharing, and Napster and other sites decimated the industry. But it wasn't the internet that nearly killed the music industry. It was copyright piracy and the public willingness to become pirates. It was the breakdown of our public understanding that we, and I mean all of us, were stealing. And I worry about that happening again today or tomorrow with AI. But let me share first some examples of AI at its best. The team at Universal Music Group and Brenda Lee, keeping the original music and background vocals, replaced Brenda Lee's original lead vocals in Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree with a newly translated Spanish vocal, created using an ethically trained AI model derived from her voice and fully approved by her. After Randy Travis suffered a devastating stroke in 2013, leading to the loss of his voice, he and Warner Music Nashville used AI to help him record the song Where That Came From. Randy and his team worked on vocals and put human touches on every note of the song that would not have been possible without AI. Universal Music Group's collaboration with ethical AI company Endel is enabling UMG artists and labels to create AI-powered soundscapes to enhance daily activities like sleep, relaxation, and focus. So what's the problem? Each of these examples are done in collaboration with the artists involved. Still their artistry, still their talent, and their rights are embedded in the project. That's not how the most popular song generating services work now. They aren't licensed by artists and rights holders, and they aren't paying for the inputs they're trained on or the outputs that compete with those very artists. We are in the Napster era of AI in the marketplace. We need to get to the iTunes stage so that we can get to streaming. To do that, we need you to do a couple of things. One, uphold copyright law, recognizing that training of AI models on the music of artists engages their copyright. Done without their permission is infringement, full stop. Upholding copyright also means that you should not cave to demands for sweeping text and data mining exceptions. Everything you need to know about this is in its name. It's not called hopelessly searching for human enlightenment exception. They call it mining. And what do we mine for? Valuable things. And where do we mine? Where we know there are valuable things. And no data is more valuable than the catalogs of our favorite musicians. As much as some generative AI companies will tell you that they're teaching the machines everything, they don't want to train their algorithms on your brother's college band. They want Sgt. Pepper and Pet Sounds and folklore. Two, we want to make AI companies keep records of their inputs. We want AI companies to track and disclose to right holders what they train their models on. Proponents for AI should be able to steal everything will claim that it isn't possible. But if we're going to unlock human consciousness with AI, shouldn't it be able to write a bibliography? Three, we want the federal government to get serious about deepfakes, and not just the worst kinds, the sexually explicit ones or the ones that interfere in our elections, but all of the harmful ones, because they put all Canadians at risk, including our kids. What started as Connor McDavid appearing to smack talk his opponents and teammates 2 years ago has turned into babies interviewing their dogs that I know aren't real, but I can't tell you why. These videos make us laugh, but the technology could easily be used to make us cry. What if someone used it to ruin your career? What if someone used it to ruin my 5-year-old's budding social life? What's illegal on paper should be illegal online. Putting your words in my mouth is not free speech. Fortunately, AI will also be part of the solution, and it's why our industry is working with tech to combat this problem. Sony Music's work with Vermilio's Trace ID tool helps protect artists in real time against digital replicas. But we need governments to make it clear that unauthorized and harmful deepfakes are illegal. There are models for Canada to look at, like the US's No Fakes Act that has bipartisan support and is backed by both the music industry and platforms like YouTube. These 3 recommendations will lead to Canada being at the forefront of AI innovation while still protecting the Canadian cultural sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, and well done taking my cue. Next, we go to Jennifer Brown from SOCAN. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And as CEO of SOCAN, I am pleased to appear before this committee to speak on the effects of artificial intelligence on the music industry. In 2025, SOCAN is celebrating 100 years as Canada's copyright collective for songwriters, composers, and music publishers. We are proud to represent the rights of more than 200,000 direct members from coast to coast to coast. SOCAN collects license fees for the public performance and reproduction of music, matches those uses to rights holders, and then distributes the royalties to our direct members and rights holders from across the world. We are only starting to uncover the full potential and implications of AI in the creative sphere, and to understand what role it will play in shaping the future of the cultural landscape in Canada. AI presents a turning point for the music industry, and we believe that with the proper safeguards and appropriate copyright framework, this technology provides tremendous opportunities to support and enhance human creativity as a tool that allows Canadian creators to continue to tell their stories, to reflect on who they are, and to contribute to Canada's identity and values. However, without the appropriate balance in place, the current state of AI presents a challenge for our members. Canadian works are being stolen and scraped by AI companies to train their models without any compensation to creators. These AI models can then output a complete song in response to a single prompt, with that AI-generated song potentially replacing the work of Canadian creators. A global study conducted by CSAC, which is one of the world's largest networks in the creator sector, estimates that under the current market conditions of wholesale theft, up to 24% of music creators' revenues are at risk of disappearing. This presents a real threat to the sustainability of the Canadian music industry. Meanwhile, the companies behind these AI models have publicly stated the importance of using high-quality, human-created music to develop their products, going so far as to say it is essential. What is not essential, apparently, is making sure that creators are paid for their important contributions. Instead, human creators are currently fueling advances in AI models without sharing in the benefits. We believe a successful AI approach will value and compensate human authorship, respect the policy objectives of the Copyright Act, and lead to a vibrant licensing market where the benefits of AI are shared with those who are vital to its development. Looking back at the online streaming that we've gone through in the last 10 years or more, similar arguments were made about the compensation and licensing being impossible. But a mature licensing regime has formed, and creators and streaming services have both benefited in the past decade. Respect for copyright does not stifle innovation. If you stream music on your smartphone, you have proof in your pocket that compensation for creators and technical innovation can successfully coexist. The adoption of AI can also be done in a way that respects creators and incentivizes human expression. So we have two positions that we would like to put forward to the committee. First, we strongly oppose new copyright exceptions. AI companies should not be permitted to exploit creators' works without obtaining consent and providing credit and compensation. A TDM exception would not facilitate growth in either the creative sector or the technology sector. While there is no evidence to suggest that a TDM exception is necessary to maximize investment in the AI sphere, it would certainly deprive creators of the economic benefits of their works. Second, we urge you to ensure that AI companies are transparent about the works they use to develop their models and that AI-generated outputs are clearly labeled. AI developers must be required to disclose which copyright-protected works are ingested and stored in their data sets. Without such transparency, rights holders are unable to negotiate on a level playing field and cannot prove when their works are used. Further mandatory labeling of AI outputs would mean that the public can then make informed choices about the type of content that they consume. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And finally, from Music Publishers Canada, we have Margaret McGuffin. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Margaret McGuffin. I am CEO of Music Publishers Canada. I am here to advocate for the ethical and transparent development of AI. Music publishers discover and develop Canadian songwriters and have made significant investments in the vast majority of songs and scores that are heard every day on radio, on streaming services, in video games, in film and television productions, and on new emerging platforms around the world. In the music space, AI has potential to support the valuable work of human creators, which in turn enriches Canadian culture and society. Our members are already leveraging the benefits of this new technology, and songwriters are using it in the studio, and our members are using it to scale their operations. Unfortunately, the music industry has also seen mass theft of copyrighted protected songs by AI companies, both on the input side for the purpose of training AI models and the output side, the development and publication of unlicensed generative AI models. This poses serious risks for Canadian creators and the companies that invest in them. Strong copyright ensures that MPC's members, songwriters, and composers maintain control over their music and receive the fair compensation they deserve. When an AI company uses music that has been scraped or captured from the internet without authorization, it prevents rights holders from controlling and realizing value for the use of their works. The development and commercialization of unlicensed AI model inputs and generative AI outputs are already creating serious market distortions and raising concerns about fair competition. NBC works with the International Confederation of Music Publishers. A recent Billboard magazine story highlights evidence collected by ICMP over the past 3 years, showing that many of the world's biggest tech companies have scraped copyright-protected music, created by millions of songwriters, composers, and artists, to train generative AI systems without permission or licensing. To put this in perspective, nearly every song ever written by a Canadian songwriter has already been scraped and is already stolen by these AI companies without consent, credit, or compensation. Imagine that someone accessed your paycheck without your permission, and that behavior was normalized. That's what's happening to songwriters. This extensive non-compliance with copyright laws in turn leads to serious negative economic impacts. Copyright works, our songs, add value to AI models. To derive fair value for the use of this copyrighted material, the music publishing industry, which includes SOCAN and CMRA, routinely grants licenses to technology companies. AI developers should be no different. The emerging market for licensing music to AI developers to disclose and maintain records of all their data should be encouraged. In conclusion, MPC believes the Canadian government must reject any calls for watering down a copyright system with a text and data mining exception. We've already heard about that today. Music rights holders must be able to control and realize value for the use of their songs. It is imperative that Canadian regulators and U.S. government approach generative AI in a manner that respects creators and incentivizes human expression. This will be beneficial for creators and for Canadians as a whole. I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. McGuffin. And we'll now turn to questions from members, starting with Mrs. Thomas. For 6 minutes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ducharme, I'm just curious, your organization, do you work with digital-first creators at all?
With all kind of creators. So it's all the form of art, from dance to visual arts. We also work with musicians, with sound artists, with theater companies. It's really from all the ways of life and type of arts.
Okay, cool. So if digital-first creators are working with you, are there helpful ways that they're using AI in order to overcome the traditional barriers of broadcasting?
Yes, most of the artists that works with us actually use AI on a daily basis. Whether it's integrated in their tools, like Adobe Photoshop has already integrated AI in their products, or their camera on their phone, which already integrate AI in the process of taking a picture, they use AI. Whether they want it or not, they do. We all do use AI right now. So it's not that, it's very helpful. Also, a lot of artists want to do research and development around AI and how it can be used to better their practice. The problem is really not in the use of AI by artists. The problem is really in the value that is transferred to American companies through the process of value capture.
Sure. And I think like one of the things that you talked about in your opening remarks and that I read also, on your website was the importance of protecting digital sovereignty. And so to that end, Bill C-18 is the Online News Act. Are you familiar with it at all?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, Bill C-18 was put in place, and, through its process, Bill C-18 resulted in Google coming forward and creating a $100 million fund. And then there was a cohort put in charge of that money. News businesses would apply to the fund and then be awarded dollars. As a result, when they are awarded those dollars, they are also signing over their rights to the information that they're producing, which means that Google can then go in and scrape that information and use it however they wish. And because these news businesses have signed off on Bill C-18 and the Google dollars, they're they're subject to Google and whatever Google wants to do with their information. This is the direct result of over-regulation by this government. So my concern is this. We have digital-first creators in this country who are generating fantastic content. We have artists in this country who are doing great work. When the government overreaches, it actually stagnates and hurts the industry. So where's that line between actually putting legislation in place that is going to facilitate further success versus actually hinder them?
It's an interesting political point you made, but my fellow members here will be able to answer you on the policy side. What I think is needed is actually investment in a public AI, so in a public infrastructures and an infrastructure that is a common, that is led, managed, and owned by the artists and art organization in Canada. So it's not a question of necessarily regulating. You're asking me how the government can regulate, which is not my thing, not my expertise. What I can tell you is that the model need to be managed in a different way right now.
If it's managed in a different way but without government regulation, what does that look like?
I'm not a policy expert, so I will not be able to inform you on how the government can really create policy to protect the artists if we just choose to give the power to American companies, we're not going to win. Basically, it's that.
Absolutely. But again, with Bill C-18, that's exactly what happened with this government legislation. It gave more power to Alphabet, an American company, Google, to scrape data and use it however it wishes.
They are stealing it anyway.
No. This bill, Bill C-18, actually generated the terms that gave Google permission. We're not talking about stealing. Google owns it. That's the agreement. That's the agreement that the government facilitated. So my concern is that with digital-first creators and other artists that exist online, that the same thing will happen to them if the government gets overzealous and overregulates AI.
So another option would be to finance a public AI, no?
What do you mean by that?
Can we own infrastructure? Can
like
we own compute power?
Like a government-created AI system?
I'm just going to, yeah. So in Canada, the research infrastructure for AI has compute power. It's called Canada Compute, Quebec Compute. They are non-profit that administer compute power for research centers. It's available to all researchers. Why don't we have a public system or a system that is owned as a common by artists and art organizations that provide that kind of service to the cultural sector?
Because that's too much government.
No, it's not the government that owns and operates it. It's nonprofits that own and operate it.
They have that ability right now. They have that opportunity.
How come?
Because it's a free market. This is exactly the point.
Not everything is in the free market, miss.
Right now, there is an opportunity. If anyone wants a space online, they have a space online. If anybody wants to come up with an AI model, they have the ability to come up with an AI model right now.
Last week, 2 weeks ago, NVIDIA invested $400 billion into OpenAI. No, it's not a free market.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Mr. Al-Soud for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Merci, Madame la Présidente. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I've quite literally just met with members from various organizations representing Canada's book sector as part of the Day on the Hill. They're actually in this room as we speak. So a quick nod to them and the great work they do. We also spoke of Quebec and the work that they do. When I met with them earlier this summer, they described us committee members as guardians of Canadian culture. I think we'll all agree that it's a very generous way of looking at us as members of this committee, but that protecting Canadian cultural sovereignty while understanding the inevitability of AI is our priority. That is quite literally the role that we hold as members of this committee. Durant notre discussion, ils ont été clairs que le but est de développer un...
During discussions, they were clear that it's necessary to develop a framework where creators are partners. We are developing infrastructure, tools, and competence for the Canadian cultural sector to be a global leader and a responsible one. I've just read the mission statement where they are positioning themselves in a way that artists could play a role in this context. We are talking about the centrist role of AI. In your opinion, what will sovereignty look like in this domain, and what do we need to make sure that Canada is truly a global leader and not just a country that is adapting? Answer. In your opinion, AI in the cultural sector needs a governance framework that is created, administered by the creators themselves. This framework should be flexible and should be adaptable to some cultural sectors, particularly indigenous communities and linguistic communities in minority communities. What we believe is that throughout Canada, we need laboratories that work on AI and allow creators to experiment, allow them to take decisions on how they themselves want to protect their data and their works. Right now, that is not the case. For years, Facebook, Instagram encouraged artists to publish their works of art on Instagram, and those works of art were scraped and used to train models. So they were lied to and stolen from. And that is what Silicon Valley has been doing for a long time. And this is what I stated in my opening remarks. So we believe that governance is really at the core. To develop governance frameworks, people have to come together. We must make sure that there are places where human beings, these artists, can come together to take decisions on policies that concern them. Now, the government of Canada is taking decisions for them. We want autonomy and the funds to be able to have a counterbalance facing the United States, which is so big and is crushing us every time we try to move forward. And that is our biggest problem. The ARIA project was essentially funded by a grant from the Quebec government to help us understand the impact. Right now, we are seeing that Americans are continuing to invest massively, of course, through capital, through Silicon Valley, but they're also polluting, destroying natural resources, and destroying the cultural resources of communities. For example, we see indigenous works of art created by people that have nothing to do with indigenous communities. This is cultural appropriation, which is very dangerous. As a Francophone, I have no AI model that represents me. They could imitate my language, but they cannot understand my cultural specificity. I am Quebecois. That's not too bad. But imagine an Acadian who has a linguistic and cultural specificity that's very different from Quebec. Fewer data has been scraped from Acadian culture, and there's a lot of biases. What's the situation for a queer artist? Take a Jamaican Canadian artist. What about these people that find themselves in complex intersectionalities in our society, where models that are biased tend to homogenize cultures? So our position is to allow people to take over their power. And to do that, we need to invest in those policies. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Duchamp.
Thank you for your opening remarks. Music Canada has been clear about protecting rights in the streaming era. You mentioned this in your opening remarks. Now the AI era may be even more disruptive. How is Music Canada preparing to protect both investment and artistic integrity without repeating the same inequities that left artists undercompensated in the last digital shift?
Chair, I thank the member for the question. It's good to see you. Look, I think, when it comes to AI, the way out of the piracy era was our members up against the odds, sort of holding out and saying that music had value. That in a period of time in which music was stolen or given away for free, saying, we believe there will be a time in which people pay for music again. I believe this to be true. I'm very excited to put this into Hansard. I've been saying it for a while. I believe music is the only thing in the world that everyone did for free, then people started to pay for, then people stopped paying for it, and now they pay for it again. This is a human success story, and I think it is one worth protecting. I think my greatest regret at the beginning of the AI boom was hearing people say that AI was not a copyright issue and not recognizing that as the massive red flag that it was, that it is the copyright issue of our generation. So that's how we're going about it.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Champoux, vous avez 6 minutes.
Mr. Champoux, you have 6 minutes. If you don't yield your time to your colleague, I will take all the time you're giving me, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you, all witnesses. It's always fascinating, interesting, and very instructive to hear you talk about this very important issue of artificial intelligence and the impact it has on the cultural sector. Lots of concerns have been expressed by people from the sector, all sectors of the cultural sector. What is happening is very concerning. But it's not all bleak. I think there are still some very interesting things going on with AI. But right now, we also need to speak the truth. We need to be aware of the risks tied to AI for the cultural sector, particularly for creators. Mr. Duchamp, let me start with you. I found your remarks or your arguments defending an intelligence model very interesting, a local one that is owned by people of the cultural industry. That's an idea, that's a model. But I'm curious because in the past, there were research tools that were proposed from Canadians, from Quebecers. We had the broadcasting platforms, and now people are trying to come up with digital broadcasting platforms. These are beautiful ideas that we'd like to see flourish. Unfortunately, competition is so stiff when we look at other countries like the US. So these businesses have little luck of flourishing. With AI, I have hope because the research that led to the development of AI was done mainly through Montreal, Quebec, with companies like Miller and their collaborators. So we came up with this technology. So I do have hope. Explain to me how this is different from an AI model that was created in the past to compete with those on the internet. Answer. There are many aspects to your question. What we're trying to do is not an AI model, but rather governance over these tools, an infrastructure that supports the possibility of creating the tools. What we are seeing with creators is that they will not necessarily use ChatGPT, DALL-E, or other image production tools. They use all sorts of AI tools, maybe to identify things in space, or AI tools to control systems, to ensure performance, or for performances in a festival. So it's not simply to generate content, but also for the management of data. My colleagues on the panel gave you other examples. So what we want to do is be able to experiment. Artists want to understand how AI affects our work and the value that they bring to the market. And also, they want to know what the rules are. The Silicon Valley rules are opaque. They are not known, and they are constantly evolving. There was an example a few years ago, a company called Runway. There were lots of artists here and elsewhere who contributed to the development of Runway ML. It was free. We were working with them. Everybody was smiling and hugging. And then one day, people received an email. You have no access to your work. Everything you put on the platform doesn't belong to you anymore. The rules have changed. The rules in AI are constantly changing just as a model. So we cannot really rely on the technology of the model. It's just budding. It started a few years ago, but we are taken over. And those are Silicon Valley rules. They gave us everything for free, and then they pull the rug away from us. So you're talking about the rights over our content, the content we use to feed the beast, so to speak. So let me put a question to Ms. McGiffin and my colleague, Mr. General, made me think of something after our meeting on Monday. Well, I'm skilled with AI models, and I want to come up with a song. That's a supposition. I generate a song, and I ask AI to produce a song with Mr. General's melodious voice using words that were written by Mr. Miles, who really had a wonderful career in that domain before he became a politician. He was a real artist. We were failed artists. He was a real artist. But my question is a serious one. Can someone, let's say I'm the one who generates that song, by some luck, it's a hit. Should I consider that that's my song, given the rules we have today? And can I, for example, obtain access to the copyrights generated by that song? Is this the current situation? And I'm asking on behalf of Mr. General because his voice will be everywhere in the world.
Interesting way to look at that. What is creation? That is kind of at the heart of what we're talking about, right? And creation is a human endeavor, and it takes skill and judgment. So I'm going to say that there are a lot of creators out there right now, songwriters in particular, and probably artists, who do use AI. They use it as a tool. But they are still coming forward and saying, this is my original work, because I put this skill and judgment into the creation of this song. If you're a digital provider that's just pumping out works out of a prompt, no, I don't see that as a musical work. So I think that is where we're at.
And I just want to add in that music publishers are, and SOCAN, are in the world of licensing. We license very small segments of songs to Instagram and to TikTok. We license interpolations, things that sound like Mr. Miles' songs, but that doesn't allow someone to write a song that sounds like your song. They have to license that. And that is the world we envision going forward. The world of licensing exists. We're in the business of licensing. We know how to do it, and this now needs to extend to the AI companies.
Merci. No, c'est tout.
Merci pour la...
Thank you. Thank you for your flexibility, Madam Chair. No problem. Mr. General, do you have any questions? Or Mr. Shampoo, did he take all your time? Or did he ask all the questions? No fear. I always have questions. Mr. Rogers, do you want to react to what was just said?
I wanted to tie a bow around that whole conversation. It's why at Music Canada we talk about rules and tools. And the tools are very exciting. They have the ability to make us laugh or cry. They have the ability to get really excited about. But unfortunately for all of us, we live in the world where we deal with the rules. That is why the licensing piece is so important. That is why the keeping it with copyright is so important. And I think as you go through this study, and as you know, this will not be the only time you talk about AI in this committee. I do think you should do your best at each conversation to ask: is this a conversation about the rules or about the tools?
Okay, merci. Monsieur Ducharme, je suis francophone.
Mr. Ducharme, I'm a francophone like you. I'm also from Quebec. But I would like to ask the other witnesses if they share your point of view. Given that I partly agree with what you said, we would like Canada to maintain its identity and autonomy, its creative autonomy. We all want artists to be able to collect money from their works, as is currently the case. But in your world, a model like the one proposed by Mr. Ducharme, could that exist? That's the first question. Second one, if so, why don't you do it yourself? Because the Canadian industry in the creative sector overall is generating millions of dollars in revenue, from what I know. And you don't need government money in a model that suits you. Why don't you do it yourself? This is just an idea.
I thank you for the question about that. Look, I think where we come from about it, and to put it into political terms for everyone here, the goal of the artists in your riding is not to appeal only to the fans of theirs in your riding. The goal and the ability now in the digital world is to find all the fans of all the people who like them all around the world.
Absolument. Vous avez tellement raison.
Absolutely. André Gagnon, who is a composer of classical music, his biggest pool of fans in the world are in Japan, not in Quebec. He's a superstar. Of course, he's deceased, but even today, he remains a superstar. We do not want our culture. Actually, we want our culture to be shared throughout the world. That's for sure. But should that go through a model as proposed by Mr. Ducharme, one that is owned by the industry and managed by the industry? That's my question.
I've said at the CRTC with regards to C11, our goal is that public policy should be building Canadian artists a launch pad. I believe there are a lot of stakeholders who'd like a bomb shelter. Bomb shelters, by definition, only serve those who are in it. The launch pad should be the goal of it.
Madame Brown, peut-être Madame Weller.
Maybe the others have something to add.
I tend to agree with Mr. Rogers. I mean, we are a Canadian country with great artists that travel around the world, as you said. And everything that we're doing is making sure that we are respected on the platforms where those works are being shared. That's where I do think a vibrant licensing market is what we need, right? These works have been taken. They've already lost the revenue from that. Let's get them compensated, and let's make sure that they're being compensated in the future and not replaced in the future. So not just the current artists that we have are making sure that they're making a living, but we have new emerging Canadian creators that actually see a viable path here, that actually look at this and go, yeah, this is a career that I want to get behind, because I'm not just going to have a singular audience here. I have the network and the ecosystem to grow. So I think licensing is really still the answer. This is something that can happen.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Is it done? Am I done?
Vous avez 30 secondes.
Thank you. You have 30 seconds left if you want to continue. I would like everyone to have the opportunity to speak.
And I think it's important to make a distinction between technology and digital technology capabilities in the sector and the AI question. In the arts and creative industries, there's been an underinvestment in management of digital cultural data, right, for some time now. So we're actually working at that disadvantage already. Creators don't necessarily have the ability to manage their data properly and maintain that closeness and ownership over it, irrespective of AI coming into the picture. So we need that infrastructure to be invested in, and I definitely do agree with Monsieur Ducharme on that point, and that the artists need to be able to govern that infrastructure themselves.
Thank you. Prochainement, Monsieur Tumba pour 5 minutes.
Mr. Chumba, 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ducharme, when you spoke a while ago, you talked about necessary autonomy, you talked about cultural specificity, governance. In my writing, we have many artists and craftsmen in the cultural sector. How can we make sure that cultural integration with AI in the industry doesn't create greater inequality? Let me come back to your previous point. What can we do to develop the sector? Answer: models exist. Some models exist. For example, data trust allow creators to place data in a trust that can be used according to certain norms that they agree on. So people come together, create a trust, and then the data could be used by the industry, by services, on condition that the standards are respected, and very often that the money be paid as well. In Quebec, there is Cultural Upedia, a trust that exists. We encourage specific data sets that belong to communities. It could be indigenous communities, Acadian communities, or Franco-Manitoban communities. Thus, communities can choose how their own cultural data, hundreds of years of cultural data that exist on the internet that has been valued or developed, could be preserved and used in the industry, in the cultural industry. So creators, hence, have control over their own production. Well, it's basic. They produced, they placed it somewhere, and now it's being stolen. So we have a strategy to protect the data, and these are data trust. That's one example of common governance, and it's optional. People can decide how to proceed to share the proceeds. We are in a sharing community. We are sharing a lot of things, particularly the internet. We share a lot of things. we are encouraged to share. So if we want to share properly, we want to be shared and compensated for the sharing. It's important to protect the value produced by Canadian artists. Thank you very much. Mr. Rogers, Mr. Duchamp has talked about regulation in the industry. What do you think about regulation in the industry?
I would say two things. The first is the most important part is to enforce the Copyright Act as is. The second part, in terms of looking for something new to do, is to enforce transparency laws. In order to understand what has been ingested, in order to enforce that Copyright Act, we'll need increased transparency. And as I said in my opening statement, the nerds freak out when we talk about this and say that the data is too big and too expansive and our poor human minds could never understand it. But again, AI should be able to build a list of what it is that it's ingesting.
Madame Margaret.
Madam Margaret? For you, as a parliamentarian with limited experience in the musical domain, could you concretely explain to us how AI is now transforming the work of artists in the musical sector?
Our companies AI has been in the studios for a decade. It's used as an ideation tool in studios. Our small companies are using it to make sure they can scale quickly and compete against global companies. But I also want to focus on the fact that the music industry and music publishing, we have data, and we are building technology to handle the licensing. What we need is the ability to license by no changes to the Copyright Act. So data is not the problem in the music industry. We retain our data, but we want to, in the AI world, make sure that there is transparency of the training data so that we can then license.
Merci, je vais finir avec Madame Kelly Williams.
Thank you. I'm done with Mr. Kelly Williams. One question for you. In the world, do you see any model that Canada could copy and adapt in the music industry? In the music industry in particular?
Others have said the music industry in Canada is actually very well equipped to do this work. The existence of SOCAN, the way in which data has been managed in the music industry up till now, I would say it is one of the industries in Canada that can probably show us the way. But again, we require that clarity in order for that licensing to take place. There are many other countries who are working in the same way. There's often a comparison to the EU Act. The EU Act has some clear protections for creators, but again, it comes down to what a country does with that EU Act, and that's the level at which we need to be thinking in Canada as well, with the capacity of the sector coming into play, with the clarity of the Copyright Act, and then that investment in creating those marketplaces, right?
Thank you.
For the work.
Thank you. Prochainement, je veux...
Now, I would like to welcome Mr. Alexis Deschênes, who is joining us today. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you for receiving me. Thank you. Hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to talk about the risk and to find out if it's really close to your sector. We believe that through AI, it's possible to even create fictive groups, fake groups. There was a recent example, a group that obtained 1 million views on Spotify, Velvet Sundown. Is this a real risk that could totally eliminate composers themselves?
Risk to sort of AI slop is stream manipulation. And so music that exists purely to be quickly generated to swamp services and then have sort of people pretend to listen to it or have spins artificially generated. That hurts the overall pool for streaming services. And Canada's major labels, as well as the major labels around the world, have joined forces to try to find ways to stop that from happening, because that dilutes the pool and hurts artists everywhere.
And we've done a lot of, the ICMP, the International Publishers, has done a lot of work with the international publishers to look at clones and fakes. And if you go, they looked at the EU app stores and found many apps that were having cloning voices, cloning images, cloning songs. It's pure copyright infringement. It needs to be taken down. It is something that Patrick was talking to earlier about having to deal with legislation around privacy and security around likeness and image.
Monsieur Duchamp.
J'aurais rien à ajouter sur les.
Don't you have anything to add about creators? It's not my specialty. I mostly represent independent artists that are doing research and development, so it doesn't really fall within our domain.
This really speaks to the need for the transparency of labeling what AI-generated content is when we have it, right, when we see it, and what the impact is on the business models.
Agreed. And as has been said before, it's the dilution of the revenue that is actually due to human creators right now, right? By flooding the systems with all of this and then manipulating is even beyond, worse. That's a word called fraud. What you want to make sure is that you're not diluting the pool, the revenue that's supposed to go to the human creators when their works are actually performed. I also want to just go back to data too on this point. We process billions of performances every quarter. So again, there's no fear of what we can handle from AI. The reporting can be handled. We can make sure that licenses happen and people properly get paid.
Thank you. Mr. Diot, you have the floor now for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And this is a general question, and I think it gets to the heart of everything to each one of you. How much government control would you like to see on AI? What does it look like? Maybe starting with Ms. Brown.
Well, I think we've all been pretty clear, first of all, keep the Copyright Act intact. No exceptions. Because when that is clear, that should bring people to the table, right? We do believe that there can be a licensing market. We have market negotiations all the time. Amazon, Spotify, Apple Music all have, negotiated contracts with SOCAN, with CMRA, with the labels, to pay for the copyrighted work. They're still innovating, and they're still paying for the licensing. So we believe that that can absolutely happen. The transparency will help us because that will give us the level playing field to make sure that we can absolutely say, you have our works. This is how we can start licensing. But we think that clarity that there will be no exceptions will bring them to the table.
Echo the same points around enforcing the Copyright Act. I think we've been clear about transparency. We're clear about identifying what is generated by an AI as AI-generated content, because that matters a lot from the consumer perspective and from the perspective of compensation. I think it's important to remember that government has many different roles to play. Legislation is one way in which it can help, that there are direct investments in AI compute that are in the private sector that are absolutely massive, could be matched or could be thought of more broadly in terms of the use in public AI investments, as we've talked about. The skills and training, very important part of this, to be able to raise the bar for creative industries to be able to participate in this economy fully. Right? Because these are often folks who are working for the content, in the case of independent artists, to get the art on the stage, right? To do the work. They don't often have the ability to invest in that back end. So to help with that skills and training development is a really key piece of all of this. And similarly, with anything to do with exports and creating those marketplaces, right? So there are other things that the government can do in addition to legislation that I think are really important to keep in mind.
Tout ce qui a été dit précédemment est...
I agree with everything else that has been said. Last year, there was less than $1 was a direct support going to artists. There was a total of about $36 million. When you asked us why we were not preparing our systems ourselves, that's the answer. With $36 million invested as direct support to artists. There's no other way for us to work otherwise. For independent artists, these are artists that support the industry. They are at the bottom of the pyramid, if you will, but they are artists moving around that pyramid. Video games will not exist without visual art artists. So they need support. Artists are amongst the people earning the least in Canada. These are job categories that are poorly represented. You can hardly find them in places like this one, and it's difficult for them to lobby the government. What we need is government investment in technology, but those investments should be controlled by the artist.
Question. For the first time in my career, I'm coming here to say do not change the Copyright Act. And it is a low interference and a no-cost solution that will protect Canadian songwriters and the music industry that invest in them. We know that many AI companies are coming and talking to you and saying how complicated it is. That is not true. That music on YouTube is free. That is not true. That it is too many lines of data. That is not true. Our companies are also tech companies. That these companies pay engineers, they pay dividends, but they refuse to pay for the songs that they're using to train or for their outputs, and that needs to change.
I'd like to just agree with everything from Jen and from Margaret specifically. I'll maybe talk about what does it look like. What it looks like is an understanding by tech companies that they have to get into a license. What it ends up looking like is licensed legal services that do not yet exist, but we're excited about happening. And it looks like a Canada that is, a leader in this. At the Kananaskis Summit, Canada led the way in saying that we needed to do all these great things with AI while respecting IP rights. And I think it's important. That was an excellent choice of words in terms of respect. It's not deal with or manage or figure out. It's respect. I think that's the answer going forward.
Thanks very much. Ms. Royer, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, esteemed colleagues, and of course our amazing panel. I'm learning so much from the conversation. My question is for Ms. Wilhelm. Prior to being a member of Parliament, I was elected locally in my riding of Port Moody Coquitlam for 14 years. The past 3 years, I was actually a school trustee for the Coquitlam School District, which represents about 4,000 staff, 33,000 students, kindergarten to grade 12. You mentioned AI skills training and education beginning in K-12, and I know for one of the larger school districts that might be easier, but there's many smaller districts throughout BC and throughout Canada. How do you recommend that implementation? What would be some best practices?
Thanks for the question. Very gratified to be thought of as having an opinion on this that could be useful. I'm not an expert in education policy, but I do have a husband who is a music teacher. Grew up and was surrounded by teachers in that capacity as well. So education is very, very important in my life, and I think in this case, starting at K-12, the place to begin is literacy, right? It's around understanding media, understanding the world around you, knowing what's real and what's not, having the cognitive skills and the judgment to be able to know the difference. So it isn't necessarily that we're saying, or I'm not saying, that at kindergarten you should be using AI generative tools. That's not necessarily the way forward, but we do need to have, at the youngest possible age, a skill set for our children to be able to know the difference of what they're looking at. And that, the challenge is there. I don't disagree with you. There are many sizes of school boards. There are many different approaches to curriculum across this country, depending on where in the country you live. So I would suggest if we're able to do things like communications technology courses that are mandatory in Ontario now in grade 9, surely we should be able to figure this out for K-12.
Well, it's really so interesting because I think 3 to 4 years ago, districts were really afraid of AI. and how to manage ChatGPT, for example, and the cheating that might happen. But today, I think the larger districts are really wanting to get in front of this. It's really, really important. What role can post-secondary institutions like OCAD and local colleges in my riding play in preparing the next generation of creators for this AI-driven world?
I can speak a little bit to the OCAD experience, which is that the students at OCAD work in a variety of different disciplines. They work in textile, sculptor, they work in new media, and they also work in foresight and thinking about design futures. What does the world we want to live in look like, and how can we design that to be a place we want to live? And so for those students, they've grown up obviously way past digital natives in that sense. The technology is ubiquitous in their lives. They know what they value coming into their education. And I think there's an important conversation that needs to be had in the post-secs around how do you, as a creator in particular, want to be able to control your work, right, and control your future, and also contribute to that conversation that you're in as a creator, right? So I think there is at OCADU a really smart, I would say, way of talking about that media literacy, the ability to market your work and understand the market that you're working in. In non-artistic post-secondary, obviously the concerns around cheating, the policies around AI use are still developing in this country and elsewhere. And I think the teachers, professors, and that side of the education equation need the support to be able to teach in this world. And that is also, I think, at this point missing a little bit from their post-secondary education. So that's a place to look as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My next question, I think, is focused on Patrick. You mentioned copyright law, number one. Number two is really around harmful deep fakes and the legislation around that. But given that legislation can take time, what would be some immediate guardrails that you would like to see put in place while the legislation catches up?
Yeah. I thank you for the question. This is something we think about a lot on this. I'll share a couple of points on this. One, we've been sort of working away on the concept of deepfakes since the dropping of the fake Drake track. That made clear at the time that, one, everything was already stolen, so there was no point preparing for it to be stolen. It was stolen. And two, bring me the person who disagrees with clamping down on deepfakes. Like we've yet to meet them. And so I do encourage the government, opposition parties, to really get serious about this. If I walked into your office and impersonated you, that is already a crime. That should be a crime online as it is in person. And, what can you do tomorrow? I think, again, drawing back to a previous digital revolution, the ads that appeared before blockbuster movies that you shouldn't, steal this film were from the Motion Picture Association. It was from industry. I think this time around, we should have government stand up and say, this is illegal. You can't do this. You shouldn't do it. We're working on the law. You could do that today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rogers. Mr. Waugh, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rogers, you gave two interesting examples that you're excited about AI. So Brenda Lee had vocal damage 50 years ago, over 50 years ago, okay? So you talked about Universal Music using AI and bringing her back to life. Boy, is she making a lot of money here. 5.9 million from over 1.47 billion streams, Rock Around the Christmas Tree, and then 2.7 million in master recording revenue for Lee and her label, which of course is Universal Music Group. So I can see why you're excited for Brenda Lee, but you were just saying if I impersonated somebody in a room, you would be discouraged upon this. And yet, when I look at Brenda Lee, who hasn't sung for 50-some years, you've actually impersonated her and made big money off of her.
I thank the member for the question, the opportunity to clear this up.
Universal Music Group and Brenda Lee worked on that project together. Sure she would.
She is. It's a fascinating story. This song is huge in Latin America before the translation. We Universal used technology to do that in concert with her. This is, as I say, an example of AI at its best. Where it's the worst is where someone uses that technology to steal your voice against your will, to have you say things you would never say. So we can have both. We can have a world in which artists and everyday people consent to it, where an ALS patient who loses their voice consents to having the technology used.
And the other one is Randy Travis, of course, who unfortunately had that stroke in 2013, and now you're kind of bringing him back to life.
Well, we're giving him, who is alive, the opportunity to finish songs that were otherwise done. But again, his rights, his work, his choices. When you hear Johnny Cash sing Barbie World, which is one of the most famous deepfakes, that makes us laugh because how ridiculous is that? But Johnny Cash's estate or nor Aqua are involved in that. That would be one where, again, we would draw the line.
Well, I'm happy you brought up Johnny Cash because in my province, Coulter Wall has been considered the new Johnny Cash. So your thoughts, Margaret, you're nodding your head, and Mr. Wall has decided to temper his performance. He does very few in North America, as you know. But, you know, everyone says, oh, you sound like Johnny Cash. Well, that's his own voice, and now he's changed a little bit his voice on purpose, and everyone's kind of pointing, what's going on with Coulter Wall's voice? Your thoughts on that?
I don't really have the backstory on that, but I was listening to his music just before the Canadian Country Music Awards, and so that's why I was nodding.
Well, they've been comparing him to Johnny Cash. Is that fair? I mean, someone can say, oh, you're stealing Johnny Cash.
Oh, wait. Sorry, may I jump back in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what you're giving is sort of a different version of the AI is a big giant brain that listens to everything and is producing something different. 2 years ago, I actually was really worried about that argument. I actually worried that it made them Star Trek and us Flintstones. But in the litigation in the United States with Suno and Udio, they have admitted in the litigation that it's not a big giant brain. They're just stealing it, and they're rearranging the ones and zeros. And so that's the difference between a human sounding like another human and tech companies using ones and zeros to steal that voice.
I think when you come from Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, and fight uphill like he has done, and you know right now Coulter Wall is pretty big. And probably AI's helped him. Probably a little bit of digital has really helped him because when you come from rural Canada, you're fighting uphill. I don't care. 5, 6 years ago, I mentioned his name to several Canadian music producers. Who cares about him? And now they're at his doorstep trying to get him to sign record labels and everything else. So that's the problem we've got, where AI kind of exposes you in this country, and then all of a sudden you guys catch up several years later.
Well, I think we wanted to be clear. Our companies are embracing AI. My medium-sized companies own thousands of songs, and when a music supervisor comes to them and says, which one fits this brief? We need a happy blue song for this ad. It can take them hours to go through their catalogs and listen again. But with AI, you can now drag and drop a YouTube video, find the ones in your catalog, the 3 that you should pitch, and within 5 minutes, you're getting that pitch back to that music super in LA and getting money to your songwriter in Saskatchewan. So
Thank you
that's
very
the beauty
much.
of AI.
As someone with family in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, I appreciated the reference very much. David Waugh, you have the floor now for 5 minutes. Oh. What did I say?
He just stole my identity.
We're a match made. That's good. We're a match made in heaven.
Somehow this conversation has gone off
We're a match
the
made in
rails.
heaven. Yes. So pleased to be here. So pleased to be having this conversation. Thank you all. I've been waiting patiently over here to be part of this. I don't even know where to direct my question because we've been doing a lot of great work, a lot of great conversations, but I think we want to touch on what regulations are going to look like. You can tell I'm looking at myself. I can tell by my hair. I've been really thinking a lot. But I want to talk about what regulations. We talk about it being possible. And I'm a bit with you, Patrick. My concern was this is a big brain that's already ingested all the songs of the world. Beatles are all ingested. So at this point, it would just be creating based on what it is ingested.
Every day, ChatGPT is refreshed on a regular basis. We are in the business of licensing, and often there's litigation that forces people to come to the table, and we retroactively license. This is not lost. This is, do not change the Copyright Act with a text and data mining exception, and let us do our jobs and license this so SOCAN can pay you royalties.
Love hearing it. I think I just want to get a little bit into the details about knowing that you can do it. What does it actually look like? I mean, in some cases, it must obviously be drawing on dozens and dozens of artists. So what would remuneration look like? And is it done through IRC codes, or what is the actual background of this that we can look at and they can give us the ones and the zeros?
I think there's a lot to be talked about here. I'm just going to go back to the very basics, because when you're talking about ISRC codes, you're talking almost about matching and distribution. We're at the licensing stage, right? And I'm going to put forward that SOCAN has very successfully, on a blanket, been licensing all the digital platforms in Canada, and all the bars and restaurants, and the broadcasters. This is not new territory. So it's very easy to come, when somebody's at the table with you, when you have a dance partner, you can say, great, this is a win-win. You need our works. We're very happy that you want to use them and that we want to, also share in that benefit. That's where the songwriters are at. They're not trying to put the horses back in the barn. They know the works have been stolen. They're saying, okay, you stole it. I need my compensation. So that is something that we believe can happen. Easily, we represent all of the world's repertoire in Canada. That doesn't just mean the Canadian artist. It means every single songwriter whose work is performed in Canada. So we would love to sit at the table with these people and have them know there's no exception, that they have to be there. Because right now they are spending their money on lawsuits, and they're spending their money on insurance and lobbying. And they could be spending the money on licensing and just have a win-win here where we actually sit at the table and figure out a licensing agreement. Afterwards, what you're talking about is more of the distribution piece. We already have all the works in there. We believe, as Patrick says, you're an AI company. You can put a list together of all the works you've used. And we process that kind of data on a daily basis. I'm not worried about that.
The key ingredient to all of that is the exclusive right. It is our ability to say we are going to do this or not do it. We are going to sign up with you or not do it. The other alternative that different elements of the cultural sector will put forward, that we don't need to do that in music. The exclusive right is what it is important, and we know that because we put a price on music every day.
And given the Copyright Act as it stands, that that you don't want to change, what has kept you from pursuing a lawsuit at this point in Canada?
A willing buyer and a willing seller. We are a willing seller. There is not a willing buyer. These companies refuse to come to the table to negotiate and are counting on you to change copyright in their favor. That's why they're not coming and negotiating, and we don't have a situation where we have a willing buyer and a willing seller. But there's starting to be sample licenses around the world, and we're watching that, and we're talking about what we can do with what we have right now.
Sorry, I mean about a lawsuit. I don't think do you need two partners to have a lawsuit? Like Patrick, in your case, that representing the major labels that have had a bunch of stuff stolen, has there been any impetus to have a lawsuit against what's been stolen?
Yeah. So I mean, in the United States, we are suing the largest generative makers right now. And so the largest generative makers are not currently in Canada, so we're not suing those players. But I think it's funny. I'm desperate for you not to ask me about headlines regarding licensing coming together, but if you were to look for headlines about licensing coming together, you would find them, and I think that's very positive news and hopeful.
And all I would say on our side too is stay tuned, right? Like, we do want the dance partner to come to the table, and if they're not going to come willingly, we will force the issue. So that is something that we will be willing to take action on.
Very interesting. How are we doing for time here? 20 seconds. Oh, my goodness. I have another question that I'll continue hopefully in the next round. Regarding competition, now we're seeing on streaming services almost 30% of the art that's actually being uploaded is generated by generative AI. That obviously changes the market for Canadian artists. Any thoughts on that?
That's all part of current negotiations now, too, and that needs to be dealt with.
Well said. Finish it right in time. Monsieur Deschênes, vous avez 2 minutes.
Mr. Deschênes, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me come back to your fear that an exception to the copyright law should be put forward. And that fear is based on lobbying efforts. What is it based on exactly?
Sorry. There's some delay. Yeah. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of it. So if you could...
La crainte que vous avez.
The fear you expressed that tech giants may be negotiating an exception to the copyright. Where is that fear coming from?
Right now, again, the global digital music industry is global. And so there's jurisdiction shopping happening right now, where there is a hope and a desire that different countries and different markets will take on a text and data mining exception. And if that happens, that will put all of us at greater risks in all the other countries that have not. As I said off the top, I think Canada has taken a great start in this in the G7 statement, saying that we wouldn't, that we would respect IP. But that's where the fear comes from, and it's something that we watch very closely, and we're hopeful that Canada stands strong against it.
Mais est-ce que vous avez des informations comme quoi?
Do you have any information that this is an approach that is going on in Canada right now?
I take a slightly different view of this. I believe in sort of parliamentary democracy and people's ability to come and make these statements to you and meet with you in your offices, and to do that. I wouldn't villainize it. It's why we have a lobbying act. It's why we can track all these things. So I'm not worried about them doing it. I'm worried about you accepting it. And I would encourage you all to hear from us today and understand our concerns about that, and to take, especially when it comes to text and data mining exceptions, take our arguments over theirs.
Peut-être utiliser mes dernières secondes sur
Let me talk about the challenge of obtaining data from tech giants to be able to find out what they are extracting from you without compensating you for. What are the mechanisms that exist and that could function to help you do that?
We do that in negotiations already. We ask for transparency. But what we found internationally when ICMP has done the work, where there's been leaked data sets, often companies will say they don't have the information on the traded data, but when the data was leaked, it was lists of very specific YouTube links with categories and genres and artists' names attached, very well curated. So what the companies often say is this isn't available, or we use a third-party supplier for our data. We don't know what's in it. When actuality, when we are able to see that data, it is very clear exactly what's in there.
Thank you. Merci. Je vous ai donné un peu.
Thank you. I gave you a little more time because of the interpretation. I know it takes a bit of time.
The floor for 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ms. Brown, just a question to you. One of the things that I read in a submission that was given to the government by SOCAN, it was stated that, quote, with proper safeguards and an appropriate copyright framework, artificial intelligence can support and enhance human creativity in the music industry, end quote. this phrase, proper safeguards, I find interesting because I think different folks would define that differently. So how would your organization define proper safeguards when it comes to AI?
I think what we're looking for is a win-win, right? We're looking for the opportunity for creators to use AI, ethical AI, right, that is licensed so that they know that they have that partnership there and that the output that they have from using AI will be licensed. The safeguards there too, is what we've been talking about, the transparency, the ability to know what has gone into your model, the labeling when it comes out so we know this is generative AI. I think those are very simple tools to start putting in place to allow a market to actually start thriving and to have a win-win for both tech to thrive, but also for the creators to use AI in a really positive way.
I guess, so you've used the phrase, licensing, ethical use of AI. These are catchphrases, but there's no further explanation in terms of what they mean and what that looks like. So when you talk about a licensing scheme with regards to AI, very practically, what does that look like?
So practically, we do not have a license in place with any AI company because, as I mentioned, no one has come to the table. But I will tell you, we have licenses in place with every other tech provider that operates in Canada. And that's sitting at the table with them. They get to use all of the repertoire. They don't have to ask specifically, can I have this piece or can I have this piece? Access to the world's repertoire of music for a revenue share. In most cases, that's what it is. If you're a subscription model, maybe it's a percentage of revenue. If you're a free service, maybe it's a flat fee. These are things that two willing people across the table sit down and figure out. How is it that you're generating revenue? Let's respect the value of the creative work that's been put into that, and let's figure out what the right monetary license really is. So a license is not theoretical. We have plenty of licenses, and most of them are, I say, with the tech agreements, they are negotiated agreements. These are willing partners sitting at the table in a free market negotiating.
So, all right, so if these AI companies are entering into a license agreement, with whom?
We think that SOCAN should definitely be at the table because the works, the underlying composition has been used. That's what they scraped, those songs. But they've also used the recordings. There's many different ways that the copyright has been stolen. So that's what we have to look at. They have to be going to the music labels, the performing rights societies, potentially the publishers, right? There's a lot of different parts of the copyright that they have actually already used that now we have to come back and license.
So when an AI model is using journal articles from years past, decades past, when they are using information from a committee like this, or me speaking in the House of Commons, or the comments that are made by other individuals throughout society, there would be a licensing agreement with all of that?
No, research, that's public. I'm talking about the actually copyrighted songs of creators, of songwriters, and their music publishers. These are songwriters that they've created, and it is protected under copyright. Okay. That's not meant to be used for free by anyone. The very purpose of copyright is that there would be a request to use it and then compensation when you do use it.
Okay.
So that is very different from public information.
Absolutely. So this is the clarification that we're seeking, right? Again, this phrase keeps being used, so let's define it. So you're saying then a licensing agreement would be generated between these AI companies and different individuals or companies that have copyrighted works?
Yes. Rights holders, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Miles, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
I think it's important actually just to continue on what MP Thomas was saying, because I think it's an important thing to clarify that this is by no means an introduction to something that is foreign to the free market. This is how the free market works with copyrighted works. This is, as you said, there's a reason why they call it mining, because it's a value. And copyrighted works, unless we're thinking of getting rid of copyrighted works, which I don't think we are, it is part of what a market looks like. It's not necessarily just regulation. It's about actually giving value to things that are otherwise stolen, as if there was no value or no copyright, if I'm not mistaken. So I do think it's important to make the distinction between what is free market and what is kind of perceived as potentially over-regulation. From what I understand, Warner Music and Universal Music and Sony Music are fans of the free market. They're some of the largest companies in the world. So I think that's important to recognize in this conversation. What we're talking about is protecting copyrighted works. I think we've also talked about the potential for this being a very doable process in the same way that when a song gets played on the radio, an artist gets money. That's how copyright works. When a song gets played on a commercial, a company calls me and says, can we use your song on this commercial? And then it becomes a choice between me and that company, depending on the value that they want to spend on that. That's called free market. And it's a wonderful thing. It can be a wonderful thing. So I think that's a really important distinction that we need to make right here, is that we're not talking about rethinking the free market. We're talking about putting value on something that at the time being, given the mining of this data as if it is not copywritten, this is what we are considering. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those other questions touch on why I think music is so important. I mean, I think being a lobbyist for the music industry is actually a great job because people love it and value it and understand it. I think where this conversation gets difficult and complicated is, where we compare it to something like, Hansard. Hansard is publicly available free. So AI tools should be able to scrape Hansard because it is publicly available and free. But music, as I said before, we know exactly what that's worth. It's the value of music is what it costs to go on a commercial. If you're stealing it from Spotify, it's the monthly cost on Spotify. There's very different things. And so if companies are coming to you saying that the value of AI is going to be, fixing traffic patterns or curing cancer or mapping the stars, that's great. But you don't need Taylor Swift's catalog to do that.
I think we all want to be, as we've said, I think today we've clarified that also it as a tool is a really, as you said, I mean, that's an important distinction to make. As I said last week, we don't want this to look like the 80s when they were talking about hip hop, when they didn't understand and they said this isn't art. When they were, of course, what was the key to that working was licensing. It was licensing sampled records. It wasn't that sampling records wasn't art. Sampling records was awesome. Some of the best music ever made. So again, what solved that problem was going, no, it's all good, but we're going to just set up a regulation. You're going to be able to license a beat. You're going to be able to license part of a song. You're going to be able to use that song to make another song. And the creativity didn't stop. It actually exploded. It exploded. But then other artists could be, paid for their work if it was recognized in another song. So I think that's an important distinction to be making here. I do, obviously there'd be questions about how the value would be arrived at. What are the other lawsuits that are happening internationally? Are they giving us a sense of what that looks like from a remuneration perspective?
Right now, first of all, I just want to comment on what you were talking about with hip hop. I think that is a lovely example of what you're talking about as creators, as innovators as well. I just want to put that out because tech will always say that we're the innovators, right? No, creators are, and creators are also pro-tech, and we just want tech to be a little bit more loving of the creative side, right? The monetary way, or the way that you would start looking at this, potentially lawsuits can help. We also go to economists, right? We start looking at what are other similar uses. How do you value it? There are some examples of licensing models that are out in Europe that haven't been adopted yet. These are many different, there's going to be a lot of different tools in this toolkit, I'm going to say, because it is an emerging use. It is going to be, and I'm going to say, experimental to start. Right? This is typically how we started even with digital. They were experimental licensing. We sat across the table from each other, we worked it out, and then in 2 years, we updated an agreement and we moved on and we improved on it. I don't think we're going to have the perfect be-all answer in the first agreement. I don't think that's realistic. But I think when you are at the table and you start having that conversation, you can get to a model that works for both parties with the expectation that you keep growing and building on it.
Thank you. We have time for half of another round, so we'll go 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and 2.5 minutes, if everyone's okay with that. Starting with Monsieur Généreux pour 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Madam Brown and Mr. Rogers, or Miss McGuffin, please tell me why you are concerned about the fact that the copyright law could be changed. Where does that fear come from? It's very important for us to understand that.
And then they can probably finish. The songs have already been stolen. Our fear is that that will be allowed to have happened, that will be rewarded.
You will eventually meet with AI proponents who will say that rights holders are standing in the way of innovation. And so that's just fancy code for we want to steal their stuff. So that's why we're worried about it.
McGuffin?
I agree. We know these conversations are happening. We've heard from other countries that they're happening. It's a lobby that we know is happening.
Madame la Présidente, est-ce que la liste des témoins qui vont venir durant...
The list of witnesses that will be coming, is it public? No, it's not public. The witnesses that you believe should be invited to testify to hear the other side, maybe representing other big players, the people that you think will be important to appear, to share their realities as well as their intentions, to eliminate any laws or any direct things, any obstacles to their developments. Are you thinking of any such players?
Avez-vous peur de vous faire taper ses doigts?
Are you afraid that you'll be criticized by the industry?
A couple of questions for when other stakeholders come. One of the questions I would ask, especially if you're meeting with an AI, someone who represents an AI model, I would ask, are you licensing the music? What are you training? What are you training on now? And is that music licensed? If and when their answer is no, I would ask them why not, and I would uphold the pillars of the Copyright Act in those discussions.
Madame Brown, voulez-vous ajouter? D'abord?
Ms. Brown, do you have anything to add?
I would.
Or Monsieur Ducharme?
Or Mr. Ducharme? I would suggest you hear from people who are creating models here in Canada. I have a list I could give you who are working in a research center, artists who are working to come up with these collaborative models, visual and musical. I would be happy to give you the list. It could give you an alternative to the industry's voice. Up till now, the music industry has been taking up a lot of room. On Monday, I said that I was not an artist. Mr. Miles is many miles ahead of me. But if I was a crackpot, a crazy man, and that I tried to generate music, but I have no knowledge of this world at all. But let's say I was tech savvy. Would I then become an artist? And if so, would I be a licensed artist? Would my work be licensed? From what I understand, we need to have copyright laws and there should be some sort of compensation. Where is that money going to come from? I'd like to have the money if I was an artist, as my example suggests. So, Monsieur Ducharme, in your opinion, would I become an artist in this scenario? No, you don't seem to be an artist, in my opinion. No offense. No, I'm not. I'm a lot of things, but an artist I am not. This study here I was at the industry committee up until June of last year. And for many years, we studied C25 and the question of artificial intelligence. There was a big bill at the time. The Liberals, once again, didn't do their job correctly because those two things never should have been linked. Protection of privacy and artificial intelligence are two separate things. More studies will be coming up, namely at the Official Languages Committee on Artificial Intelligence. We spoke about official language minority communities. But we need to know from you and from the industry what's happening. Other witnesses will be called to appear before this committee. How can we make sure that we are promoting growth within your industry with the help of AI tools? And how will we protect the industry? You're right, Mr. Ducharme, we must protect this industry. Is a governance model the right approach? I don't believe so. Can the government have a role to play? Probably, but we have a lot of work to do to make sure that our Canadian identity or Quebecois identity, Francophone identity be protected. Thank you for your speech. There is no time for an answer.
Monsieur Al-Sud, prochainement pour 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take a very quick moment to say you all clearly love what you do. And you're surrounded by others in your space who very clearly also love what they do, and you just want to keep doing it collaboratively. I want you to know that we can tell, and we appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun, so many questions, such little time. Mr. Rogers, I'll go back to you very quickly, because I think it's worth emphasizing in the broader context of what would be, I believe, our intent, which is creating space for AI to grow, for Canadian industry to lead, without it bearing a cost on Canadian culture, on Canadian heritage. Tech and music do not operate without one another as is. You mentioned the work you do alongside tech already, but could you expand on how Music Canada engages with cross-sector organizations around AI, in music in particular?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. I mean, you know, the modern record label is a tech company. In order to find fans in Japan, we make use of technology, including AI-engaged technology. We are very excited about what licensed legal paying AI models will do for the industry in order to continue human creativity. After this meeting, I'm going to talk to Mr. Waugh and make sure he understands like how great that Brenda Lee example is. But I am, you know, I think there is such opportunity. There are the heartstring opportunities about losing voices and doing things that really, you know, make good advocacy. But a licensed legal generative service could make Mr. Genereux an artist. And I think we could be excited about that. But all of the inputs, including Mr. Miles's inputs, need to be compensated for Mr. Genereux to become an artist.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Ms. McGuffin, a quick question for you. How realistic do you think it is for, would it be for licensed training data at scale? And who do you think should bear that responsibility? Is it platforms? Is it developers? Is it governments? I'm just curious on that front.
I think government in making sure there's no loophole so that tech companies do not have to supply it to labels and publishers and collective management organizations like SOCAN and CMRA to then negotiate those agreements and pull the data in and to invest in their own tech to make sure those payments are made.
Fantastic. And we hear on a call for transparency very, very frequently. Knowing whether their works were used in AI data sets, would you support a nutrition label, so to speak, or a disclosure standard for AI-generated content?
I think the role of government in this needs to be reviewed exactly how it would be helpful. Often we do that in negotiations already in the private sector, but there may be a need to have some discussions on possible things that would help that. But I'm not committing to that right now. I think I want to be optimistic that people will come with their data and talk to us about a license.
Perfect.
effect. Yeah, and I think when you meet with stakeholders who oppose this idea, who suggest that the secret sauce will be given away, that's not how an ingredients label works. The ingredients of a Pepsi does not explain how to make a Pepsi. So ingredients is a totally valuable example, and I encourage you to push on that with stakeholders who oppose it.
Fantastic. And maybe a final one. All of you represent parts of Canada's creative ecosystem. We talk a lot about protecting culture, but how do we design an AI future where Canadian artists, educators, innovators actually shape culture rather than just defend it from external forces? How do we future-proof, so to speak, what we're likely to see happen in the industry? I'm open to thoughts from anyone.
And I would say invest in the creators of the work and invest in their ability to own, control, and benefit from their own intellectual property. When we talk about copyright, we're talking about a form of intellectual property. In other industries, things like patents, if a data scraping exercise gave up the recipe and method for making a Pepsi, there would be hell to pay. If we can use that analogy a little bit in the cultural sector, we can understand the value a little bit more, right? So I think that policy lens and government lens, that IP and the ownership and ability to exploit that IP is also the model in the cultural sector. It just looks different and also has a cultural value.
Les arts et la culture.
Arts and culture are made up of many disciplines. We spoke today a lot about music, the music industry. Cinema is a very similar world. Arts and culture and the content created here in Canada by independent artists, collectives who work within companies like musical groups, musical companies, theater companies, we can't forget them. A great many Canadian creators are not supported by a specific sector. So we must not let them fall through the cracks. We have to be open to them, ask them for their opinion. We would like to know what these creators think. How could we best protect them? And how do they contribute to Canadian content? Probably through investments. Thank you. And finally, I will give the floor to Mr. Deschênes, who has 2.5 minutes. And the final word. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a small question of clarification. I want to understand what we're aiming to protect. In the information document that was given to us, we speak about the economic importance of copyright. In 2023, 600,000 jobs, $63 million, 2.3% of the GDP is represented by this sector. Is that the whole of the economy that is threatened here?
In terms, Canada is the 8th largest music market in the world. We're the 3rd largest exporter. We're only behind the US and the UK. The music industry in Canada, both its independent and major space, is a success story. It is a success story worth celebrating and I think worth protecting. AI and the collapse of copyright law in Canada poses a massive risk to that. And that's what we're here to talk about today.
C'est combien l'importance économique de cette industrie?
And the economic worth of this industry.
Dollars annually in Canada.
Une question pour vous, M. Ducharme.
A question for you, Mr. Ducharme. I'd like to give you 1.5 minutes for you to speak to us about the collaboration that can happen between you and AI. With a positive outlook, what do you think about this? The Simon Fraser University and the Meta Creation Lab at that university is looking into these very questions, these new emerging technology questions in the artistic creation world. They created a visual generative model that doesn't use any copyrighted works. It can be used by artists to train the model on their own content, and artists can then use the content generated. It is a very interesting model. The same kind of model has been created by other researchers and artists in the States and in the world. The model will generate an image based on the works that were used to train the model and that the artists own. So the artist will create a data set, feed it into the machine. So we'll feed into that data set, grow the data set, and then we'll be able to use on their own visual styles and their own works of art. The problem here is to have the model work. It can't work on a simple computer like yours or mine. It has to work on a powerful computer, and that infrastructure isn't currently available. And so artists have to find a way to have access to a very powerful calculus infrastructure. How are they going to fund this? They're going to fund it themselves. They are asking for grants, turning to the Canadian Arts Council, and if they are granted any sort of investments, they will use it to generate this model infrastructure. Currently, we don't have the current spaces or infrastructures necessary to create these products and these models here in Canada. There are some models for video, for music, and for visual. If we don't create these spaces and we don't invest in the Canadian infrastructures that are available and accessible to artists, we won't be able to move forward. We will halt innovation. And university research labs will be the only ones benefiting from this. That's all the time.
All of our excellent witnesses today for your testimony. It's really valuable while we put together our report. If you don't mind waiting, members, I have a budget for next Monday, it's not next week because we're away next week, but for our briefing on CBC Radio-Canada, I have a budget for snacks that day. Can I have a member, what am I asking, to pass it or to? Someone to move it? Mr. Toomba moves it. Everyone's agreed that we can pass this budget. And happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see you when we're back. Meeting adjourned.